Alright, this is a 2019 Lexus RX 350, and I'm going to do the brakes. So to start with, I'm going to check the fluid for moisture, see if we need to drain that. So I'm going to use my tester and some air. I'm going to go over here and check this real quick. So blow that area off. Kind of want to keep it clean. You don't want to contaminate the system. I want to clean that off, use it as a workspace there. Just going to open that. And this is going to test the moisture content. May have to remove the filter basket. I think there's probably a filter basket in there. There is. Slippery little sucker. Alright, let me pause this for a moment. Alright, so I'll just use this little hook to kind of get on apart. See if we can get that dude out of there. We don't want to damage it. Looks like you have to twist. There we go. So be careful with that. You don't want to damage that little filter. Now let's try this again. Okay, it's showing okay. I wish it was 1%. I'll visually inspect it and look at the rest of the system and make a final decision on that later. I do have the stuff to switch it out, and it's not a huge deal, but I want to make absolutely sure that it's necessary. So we'll go ahead with the brakes, the front replacement of the calipers and pads, and then we'll go from there. Okay, this may be a little hard to see, but I'll do my best. I'm going to show you where the jack points are on a 2019 RX 350. If you've got this little running board here, there'll be a notch. You'll see this notch right here. And if you look in the notch, you'll see a seam here, a weld right here with two notches in it. Oops, sorry. See the two notches? You want the jack to sit where it straddles those two notches, because there is a notch in the top of the jack that bead sits in. And I'll show you that here in just a minute. Okay, so it's important to chock the back wheels, apply the emergency brake if you can, and if you'll notice now, I have the jack in place, and you can just see that one divot there, and you can see that the jack actually straddles that. What's important here is it's not pressing on that seam. It knows that there's something substantial above here and here, and that just kind of locks it in place. You do need to be on level ground and take proper precautions. Use jack stands if you're going to work under it, but that's how it goes. Okay, so I do have the jack positioned and just kind of finger tight just to hold it in place. The vehicle's on level ground relatively, and I have the back wheels chocked. What I am going to do, I do have an impact, and I could just take them off, but I like to just break these loose. You can kind of feel if some feel tighter than others. We're going to torque them back down properly when we place them. Some of them were over tight, you'll notice. Some of them were a little loose, but I just want to do that just to break them loose. You don't want to unloosen too far or it'll actually shift. Then we'll just raise the vehicle. That should give us adequate clearance. Don't want to tighten it up too much. If it gets too tall, it could cave in or fail in some way. Just get it tall enough where you have an inch, inch and a half, 2 inches below to work with. Okay, so I am going to zip these off. I did determine that it's a 21 millimeter, and you always, and I try to be redundant about this to avoid complacency, but always have your proper PPE, don the glasses and the hearing protection, etc. when you're working with these tools. We'll make sure we're going in the right direction. Make sure you grab them. Make sure you account for all of them. Pro tip, cut that box up and all your brake parts came in, stick it under there before you go disassembling and cleaning things. Maybe put some plastic down, take care of the surface beneath as well, and remember that if you have any fluids, you need to try to reclaim them or catch them, things like that. We'll move to the next part. Alright, again, having protective eyewear and following all the best practices, I've got some non-chlorinated brake parts cleaner. Before I disassemble anything, and before I blow air in it and just get a whole bunch of that particulate airborne, I'm just going to hose everything down and let a lot of that stuff just drop down on my cardboard. See? Won't hurt anything. Then we can hit it with a little air, let it dry, whatnot. Easy on the air though, you don't want to displace anything or blow something. See, very little airborne particulate left. And then we can proceed with removing the caliper and then the rotor, and then we'll check all those parts out. Another pro tip real quick, take lots of pictures when you get to this point, and if you want, even run a video. You could even put the camera at more of a intense angle so you can see what you're doing back here. So as you take stuff off, you know how it goes back. Mark stuff with Sharpie if you need to, or grease pencil, wax pencil, whatever. Lay the parts out on the cardboard. Make sure you don't just let your caliper hang either. That's a big pet peeve of mine. Has some rope, string, chain, something, twine, baling wire is great, coat hanger, whatever. Suspend that, not let it hang on that flexi hose. Okay, so we're going to take out these two caliper pins, the upper and lower caliper pins, and those are 14 millimeter. Rest this until we can find a more permanent situation here. In this case, I like to use a chain or something like that to hold it in place. But right now, what we can inspect, just have a look at everything, look at the seals, check their condition, make sure everything looks okay there. We'll probably recondition these a little bit. We can compress these and stuff here if we're careful. So this one could actually probably rest here. If you knock it off, then you cause some extra pressure. I really like using these, so we can probably set that out. But I'm going to go ahead and check these pistons the rest of the way, inspect everything, get them compressed again, and then we'll go into this part. Okay, so what I've been doing is actually just manually articulating these pistons and just pushing them in to make sure that they feel okay, that they don't hang, and everything feels good. Now, another pro tip. If you don't watch it, if you leave this on, you'll be spraying brake fluid all over your engine bay. If you press all of those in at the same time and you've added fluid, since the brakes have started wearing, I did notice that when we checked this initially, we were down to the min, and that's because of the extension of the pistons as it wears. So good idea, even if you have that little cup to catch bugs and stuff, I like to put a paper towel there in the top. And that way I can pop my head over as I'm working with this, and if I start seeing my paper towel look wet, then I know that I probably need to go over there and drain some fluid out so I don't make a mess. So I'm going to finish testing these, and then we'll get back to removing the caliper, the rest of the pad and all of that. Okay, one more thing on these. I've pushed both of these in manually. Again, I like to do that and feel. A lot of people don't or can't. So you can use other compression methods, C-clamps. You want to be careful when whatever you're doing. They make special tools for that, and it keeps them from getting side loaded. I would recommend something like that that's made for it instead of just finding some vice grips and such. But if you're gonna do that, welding vice grips work pretty good, the big C's, because they'll fit all the way in here and they'll back right up. You don't want to get a condition where the plier is offset because of a banjo fitting or something like that. But you can use another tool, but be sure that when you push these in, use the right tool. You can damage the piston, you can damage the seal, you can damage the whole assembly if you don't get even pressure on these as you press them in, and look for damage and fatigue as you do it. Okay, so we can go ahead and remove the pads themselves. These are springs to spring load the pad, see, to keep it away from, that's what it's supposed to do. Keep it away from the rotor when they're not being depressed, so they don't ride on it and heat up. So that's to literally keep them from pressing down. So these are very important, and you get new ones in the kit, but retain this stuff and remember how it comes off. We can just pop those out, and then the pads will just pop out of here usually without too much effort. Just wiggle those out and keep track again. Now see, there's the wear indicator. You probably could go until that notch doesn't show up anymore, but that's about spent. You also want to look at the front and the back, or the inner and the outer rather, pads, and see if they're wearing evenly. Because if they're not, that means that the caliper may not be working properly. See how much thicker the inner pad is than the outer one? That means more pressure is being applied to this side than this side. There should be equal pressure applied. And some of that is physics, some of it you can't work out. That's not too terrible. Not sure I'd be too concerned about that, especially since we're going to be taking these pins out very carefully, making sure that we don't damage these seals. If you do, you need to have some on standby. It's probably good to order those every once in a while. I did not. I'm going to try to save these. I'll wipe a little Vaseline on them, let them set a minute, and then use a plastic tool and very carefully get them separated from the nut. But there's a pin here in the back of this caliper that we'll want to take out, and we'll want to pop that. There we go. They're kind of stuck on there, so I'm not going to try to force it. We'll do that in this next step because I want to get the proper stuff for this. But the pins are a little bit seized. Now I can move them, but that's what happens. If these pins aren't able to slide freely, you can get uneven wear on the pads because the pressure's not being applied evenly, because there's a partial seizure here, or a full seizure. So we'll go through that. Okay, so I chose one of these little plastic tools that's made for like cell phone and small electronic device repair. I'm just going to real carefully slide that seal off of there, and see, then that pin will come out, and we're going to clean this and apply new lubricant so we can set that aside. And then we're going to do the same thing, see if I can get down there to the bottom one here. And again, I'm just going to pull this out just a little. You want to be very careful of these because most of the time they're in decent shape and you can save them, but you pull on them and then snap them in the middle, and then you're done. And then this one will come out. Now pay attention to which one is on the top and which one is on the bottom. This is very important. This is a bottom pin, a lower pin, and it's got a little plastic bushing on there. You'll notice that the pin that we took out of the upper side, it does not have that. So pay attention to that. Those are two different ones, and the lengths are different as well. Sorry, I got out of camera frame. So remember that this one with the little plastic thing on the end went on the bottom, and the other one went on the top. Very important to keep in mind. So anyway, once you pull these down, those are going to be cleaned as well. Okay, once the pins are out, the next part is, let me take this off. On the back side here, there are 2 more bolts that hold this whole piece on here, and that's what we're going to work on next. Okay, so this is the back side. These are the 2 bolts that we're going to remove. They are got a 19mm socket to remove those. There's one here, down here, the lower one, and then the upper one. You probably, if you got a real strong shop compressor and a good ratchet, you might be able to break them loose. But I found that these are super tight usually, and knuckle busters. So just use reason when trying to remove these if you don't have the right force. We'll knock these loose, and then we'll pull this assembly off and have a look. Okay, so I tried leverage. Now I'm going to try force. And those puppies were in there, but we got it. All right, on to the next part. All right, so again, keep track of how this came off, which side is the upper side and which side is the lower side, and which pins go with which, right? Keep everything in order, make sure everything's there. The rotors sometimes have a screw in here. This one does not. I'm going to be replacing this rotor, so I think a little bit of gentle nudging is in order to see if we can just get it to pop loose. Yes, you would never do this to a rotor that you wanted to ever use again, so I hope I bought the right ones. There we go, and we have success. You can still inspect it, see if there are any anomalies that might be worthy of more look. That thing, other than the dents in it from where I was banging on it, looks like it has pretty even wear. Check the hub, make sure everything looks good there. Everything looks okay so far. Always be careful of this stuff. This is the ABS stuff, the sensors and things like that. I want to be careful of those kinds of electronics. I probably shouldn't put that much pressure on that. Probably need to reconfigure that a little bit. Anyway, that's good to go. Now we can rebuild her. Okay, so I moved the rebuild part of this inside because it's extremely hot outside, so I want to cool off for a minute. And I'm doing this, this is a little bit unorthodox maybe. I'm doing this in the bed of my laser. So that whenever I use these chemicals, I have a 700 CFM fan that exhausts this laser system. So I have the exhaust fan flipped on so that this acts as a little paint booth, so to speak. So I can safely do this inside without breathing the fumes and things like that. Too bad. So basically what this is going to be about, I have the caliper oriented just like it came off that right side of the car. This is the top, this is the bottom. If you need to make a mark on it, find some way to identify it. Either this writing looks like it's up 1119 and then it has an R on it. That's a good way to tell. This is the bottom. But just kind of pay attention to that, because remember, it matters on the pins. So I'm just going to rotate this and have a look at this part. Now remember, we were very careful removing this from the stud, and we want to do the same thing here. It's going to fit just inside the groove here, but we can just kind of very carefully manipulate this out. The idea is to just let it release on its own, just in case it's sticking. There we go. We got that out intact. And then we'll want to clean all of those, clean all of these, clean in here, and then we're going to apply more lubricant. So these are very important. A lot of people replace these every time. I usually don't, unless I see that they're dry rotted or not in good shape, or not in terrible shape. So there's those, and I think those will be fine once we clean them up a little bit and recondition them. Now, these pieces are going to be replaced also. We're going to talk about that. It's important to note which one goes where and how they go, and things like that. So you want to, again, take pictures, take a video while you're doing it even, so that you can keep track of what goes where. And we'll dig into that next. Okay, we're going to clean these and these, all these pieces that the slides and the pins would go on. And wear eye protection and put some gloves on. If you need to wear a respirator or whatnot, do so. But don't look down in there and then start spraying it, because there's nowhere for it to go and it's going to come right back in your face. So be careful where you spray things. That's not a through and through. So you can spray in there, but you want to do something like that, because see, it's going to fly right back at you. And you don't want that stuff flying everywhere. You can just kind of do that if you have a rag to twist down in there, a real small, like a wire brush, a brass brush. I don't have any of the little ones like for pipe cleaning or whatnot. That might be a viable alternative, but typically what I will do is just twist up the rag, and twist it in there, and just work it around and try to clean up inside there as best you can. We're going to put new lubricant in there. We just want to try to get out all the old lubricant that we can. And the same thing for these. You can squirt, again, be careful, it'll still fly back at you, even there's a hole on the other side. Anytime you spray, you always want to shield your eyes, because it will blow back on you. This stuff comes out with quite a bit of force also. So just be mindful of that. I used to try to hold it sideways. Just, you don't have to go crazy on that stuff. I mean, this is made to give a little pressure. See, it'll really clean this stuff off. So, and just get these all cleaned up. You want to look for any kind of wear that may be abnormal, or if it has an imperfection in it. Now, you're going to see some flat spots and things like that are designed into it. That has to do with letting the lubricant be able to pass through and actually get where it needs to go. It looks like there's been some wear here in this area, and it looks like it's more severe on one side than the other. So maybe this pin was side loaded or something like that. But hopefully getting all this stuff back in shape and getting it put back together and lubricated and free and clear will help with that too. Now, here is the kit that comes with the brake. So if you want, you can pop these out one at a time, but these metal pieces, be careful, they can cut you. They'll just pop out of here, and then you can just clean this up a little bit, replace it with the new one. What's going to matter here in this instance more is these new ones can squeak, and a lot of people will take, I usually use anti-seize lubricant, the Permatex stuff, and a little dab will do you. You get a little dab of that stuff anywhere, and all of a sudden it's all over you. So be very, very careful. Use this very sparingly, because worst case scenario, it can get on the brakes and on the rotors, on the pads themselves, and cause problems there. Even in the best case, you'll get that stuff all over you, and it's a nightmare to get off. I don't lubricate between here and the new piece. What I do is lubricate just the tabs of the brake pads that slide into this new piece, if that makes sense. So in this next part, I'll take one of these off, and I like to do it one at a time, match up the other one, pop it on, and just do each one separately. So, if I did this every day, I'd know which one is which, and I'd know where they go. But since I don't, I do different cars, and they're all a little different. I take the time to do one at a time, match them up. And once all that's clean, I'll go a little bit more into, when I get all that back together, we'll go back into re-lubricating these parts and then reassembling the rest of it. Okay, Okay, so I'll show you the full process on how one of these works. I'm going to find the one that matches that first of all, and make sure that it's the same. They look to be. I don't see any that are a closer match, so that looks like the one. And this one will just pop off again. Be careful not to cut yourself. But let me show you on the new one real quick. On the back side, you'll notice one of these tabs is flat, straight, and one of them has a little bend on it, and that is kind of like a spring. So what you can do is put the spring side on first and kind of get it snapped into the hole. Get in there. Sometimes they're a little harder than other times. And then once you get it snapped in the hole, there you go. That'll just snap right into place. But start on that side and you'll have a little bit of spring, and then flip it over and it should wrap that tab around that side. And that looks pretty typical. And here's the other old one over on this side. Just pop this one loose. And then I'm going to match it, and it looks like it's going to be that one. So let me hit this with the brush. I think I'd already cleaned that other one. Yeah, I'd already cleaned that one, but I just popped this one out. I think I'm going to double check because I want to make sure we clean them. Sorry, I'm probably moving the camera there. I'm paying more attention to what I'm doing than in the camera right at this point. And then those should just pop right in just like that. I'm going to pop this one back off and make sure that I cleaned it. It's probably okay, but no. I'm going to make sure all that's off of there. There we go. There we go. That looks a lot better. So now let's put her back on. And then I've already done the other side. Okay, so all of those are on. That brake has all 4 new pieces. Now, next we'll do this part. Okay, everything's fairly clean now, so I ditched the gloves for a minute. You also want to make sure that all this stuff is dry, and again, if you're blowing compressed things into holes, always cover them up. Use eye protection, use common sense, that kind of thing. Make sure that all the pieces are dry. I do know that these are in very good shape after I reconditioned them, because I actually pulled one all the way through so that I flipped it inside out. And I got to inspect it from the inside. It looks pretty good. Okay, so now we're going to lubricate these pins and put this stuff back in. Now typically I will like to put these back in first. I try to use these clean room swabs so that I can apply this Never Sees a little bit more surgically than using this big brush that comes with it. But what I want to do is just get a little bit around here where that seal will go, and I also want to coat the inside. You don't want to put too much down in here because that can cause problems. You just want a coating on the inside. At least that's what I've found. And then I'm going to put this end in first, because once you put the pin in, I find it hard for you to actually get this to seal. This is made to be done before you put the pin in. And then I've got a little bit of that Never Sees on my gloves, and a little bit just got everywhere, so you can see I'm making a big mess of everything now. But that one's in, and then we'll do the same thing down here. I want to coat inside there, and we'll take a little bit and just go around. Now I had already cleaned in here, and in my previous sections talks about that. Alright, so we've got those. I'm going to pop this one back in, and then once you start touching all this stuff, it gets kind of crazy. I'm just going to give it a little twist, make sure that everything seats good. Okay, that all looks good. Now we do need to pack a little bit in here in the bushing, and it's going to carry some of that away. So I just like to get, you know, a glob or whatnot and try to get it in there and just kind of pack it around in that. Kind of something like that. Just to pre-pack that just a little bit in there. You don't, again, want too much, but you want to fill some of that void, I think. And then I will use, now remember, keep track of which one's which. I'll start at the bottom. I'm already making a mess here, this stuff. So, and then just a light coating, very light on these. You don't have to be super generous with it. Like that. And then I try to keep it from pulling all that off. You feel it. There you go. And then you just kind of have to work it back and forth a little bit until you can get it kind of close. There we go. And then work that seal up around the pin like so. There we go. And that's what we're looking for. Clean all that up. Make sure if you touch any of these areas, especially with that never sees on your hand, you might want to clean those areas again, wipe them off. Some of that matters. So, like I said, that stuff can get away from you pretty quick, even if you have a little bit on your rag and you wipe the same place. So just be wary, or aware of that rather. And that's what you're going to do on both sides. And then I usually work it a little bit, you know, just to make sure that it feels okay. It's going to feel a little tight at first, but as you move it around, it'll loosen up. See, you'll get a little vacuum in there too. That's kind of normal, and I'm getting some more of it come out. But just clean that up as best you can. Clean the faces of, oops, I'm sorry, I'm out of camera range. I just kind of work this around. You'll notice that more of that never sees is coming out. I might have used a little bit too much. Definitely clean the face of these, because with cleaner, again, brake cleaner, make sure there's no never sees on these really shiny flat areas. That helps keep this from twisting when you screw the other nut into it, the other bolt. Otherwise this thing could just sit there and spin and it won't ever get tight. So that's kind of by design. So don't lubricate those shiny parts right there. If you do, kind of clean those up. And then you'll just do the same thing for the other one. And then we'll put this back on the car, put the rotor back on, and then snap the brakes in. There's also some more stuff in the hardware. Remember those springs, and there's also some wear indicators in here that are made from kind of a soft metal, and it's supposed to make them squeak when they get low, to let you know that you need to do some maintenance on the brakes. And those have to be put on in the right place. We'll go over that stuff in a little bit. Alright, so we're ready for the new rotor, and I went ahead and took it out. This one doesn't have sticky plastic all over it. I did go ahead and clean it a little more. Although this one really didn't need it, but I did, just in case there was a residue on there. You want that to be really clean. So I'm going to reattach this with the 2 bolts, the 19mm, and according to the documentation, the torque on those bolts is spec'd at 77 foot-pounds. So I'm going to get these started by hand, and then I'm going to use the torque wrench to actually get these to the correct tolerance and tension, torque rather. So I'll just get these started by hand, like so. And I do have the jack under there and 2 jack stands. Redundant safety there, just FYI. So we'll get these just snugged up is all we want. Like so. Just get it snug. And then we'll get the, I still got a little bit more. Okay. And then let's get our torque wrench and have it set to, it's like right at 78, close enough. sometimes this big old torque wrench is a pain to get in the right spot. There we go. That's all she needs. If you over torque that, it can actually cause problems. So the rotor's still kind of loose right now. Once we put the wheel on, that'll take care of that. So the next part is going to be actually putting in the pads, the wear indicators, putting these pins back in, putting the cylinder back on, and going through that part. Okay, so I have this mounted. I have the two 19mm bolts torqued to 77 foot-pounds, and I've got all of that oriented. I have my new pads, and I've installed the wear indicators the way they need to be on the top position of the inner and outer pad. And I'm gonna, the back works relatively the same way. I'll show you on the front, of course, for obvious reasons. Now this is where we're gonna need to apply a little more lubricant. And again, I like to use the clean room swabs. I get a little bit more control. I can be a little more precise with this stuff because you don't want it going where you don't want it to go. So I'm going to take this pad, and it's going to snap right in here. And what I'm going to be looking for is I just want to lubricate these bottom sides and the top sides where it's going to slide in these metal pieces. And that's all I really need. That's all I really want. That right there. Let me get up here a little closer. And maybe on the end, just in case, but I've got a wear indicator there. But you don't want it to actually get on the surface of the rotor or anything like that, so be careful as you do this. So once you get that applied, then you just very carefully squeeze the pad into position. And you may have to mess with it a little bit to get it in there because those are spring loaded. It will snap into place if you have everything correct. There we go. And you'll notice I had to push that wear indicator under so it would slide in that slot. They'll snap right in just like that. The back side will do the same way. Just be careful that, see, I'm already getting that grease that never sees, anti-seize. And it's spreading everywhere I touch a place. That could be a place for contamination. So just watch out with that as you lubricate those points, and be careful. And then once you get the back plate on, or the back pad, that's when you'll reattach this, and that'll be coming up. And of course you attach it with these two, and we have specs for this too. These need to be torqued down to 25 foot-pounds of torque on the 14mm bolts. We'll go through that next. Okay, so I have the front, or the inner and the outer pads in place. They all look good. And before I put the cylinders back on, remember these spring-loaded deals, the anti-noise or anti-vibration things, and then just need to go back in here like they were before, which there's a little hole for those. And I believe it just goes like that. This is also included in the hardware, but just find those holes where they go. There are actual holes in the base of the pad. And then that one's hard to find. There it is. Nope. There it is. Okay, like that. And that way, that'll give that some help. Now, we should be able to remove this. Let's make sure that we're twisted the right way. You see, that was actually spun around. Let me get my chain out of there. I've already depressed these. These feel good. They're in good shape. So then we should be able, to just slide that. You might have to work it a little bit and push in on these pins, and then that will just snap right into place like this. Be careful again of transferring that oil or grease or whatnot onto the surface of the rotors and things like that. So then we'll come back in with this 14mm that we were talking about a little while ago. You may have to get that oriented correctly, we'll get it started. We'll get this other one started. And then we'll just snug these down so that they're just snug, and that's all. Yeah, because they're going to start spinning here in a minute. There we go. Just snug it down. You may have to hold that one, back that one up with your hand. That's usually all you need. If it wants to keep spinning, you could put an open end wrench on it if you needed to. So just get these just snugged. Then we'll get torque wrench. I think we should be able to get it in here. We're going to torque these to 25. Oh, that's really not a lot, is it? They were way tighter than that before. I'll double check that, but that's the value that I got on a few sources. There we go. Now you can reattach the tire and should be good to go. Now these are ceramic brakes. A lot of these brakes require a specific break-in procedure. You got to take it out and get it up to a certain speed and hit the brakes X number of times and things like that to kind of break those pads into those rotors a little bit. So be sure you do that. Don't skip that part. It's very important. There should be instructions with the brakes and pads and whatever that you get. Okay, so I started all of these by hand, made sure that everything was lined up and that they weren't off center or anything like that. And I'm just gonna very gently buzz those in just so that I can save a little bit of time. But I have no intention of tightening with this air wrench. I just want to get them up there where they're snug. I'm going to take my other stuff out before I forget about it. And then I'm going to actually torque these down. I'm going to take an alternate pattern. I'm going to, you don't just start in one space and go around. You have to alternate. So I'm going to do all of that. And I'm going to use the torque wrench to get these torqued down to the proper torque as well. If you're going to do it, you should really pay attention to those little details. Make your brakes last a lot longer. Okay, looks like they're calling for 76 foot-pounds on these. That's far less than I would normally use. Probably far less than that wrench would put on it. Leads me to believe I have been over tightening my lugs. Okay, that's what they call for. We'll check them at 3,000 just to make sure, but there it is. That side's done. Now you just repeat on the other side.